This is Graphic Novel TK, your podcast guide to comic book publishing. Hey, this is Allison. Just a quick heads up before we start. We were fortunate enough to get to talk to Miriam at her office at a genuine publishing company. However, that does mean that there are genuine publishing company sound effects in the background. There's a copy machine and a janitor and rich soundscape. So excuse us for the background noise and enjoy this high fidelity experience.
Hey everyone, welcome to Graphic Novel to Come, Graphic Novel TK, the podcast about the comics publishing industry and how it works. I'm Gina Gagliano.
And I'm Allison Wilgus.
We are excited to have an awesome guest today, Miriam Miller, who's going to tell us all about rights. Miriam, it's so great to have you here. We're excited to talk about rights. Can you tell us who you are, how you got into publishing, and how you got from getting into publishing to the job that you have today?
Sure. I'm Miriam Miller. I'm the Senior Subsidiary Rights Manager at Holiday House Books. I have been working in publishing since about 2010, and my first voyage into the industry was actually when I was a senior in high school. I don't know if you know this, Gina.
No, I don't know anything about it. Tell us more.
So I'm from Pennsylvania, and in Pennsylvania, every high school senior has to do this project where you kind of do a mini internship for 2 months. And I had this old family friend who had been giving me early versions of picture books and early versions of all these kinds of exciting kids' books for my whole life. And so I reached out to Neil Porter at Roaring Brook Press to see if I could come work for him for a couple of months. And so that is what I did when I was in high school. And I think I really caught the bug from doing that. And so I started when I was in college. I did some literary agency internships and eventually got an assistant position there. Kind of realized that I wanted to be on the publishing house side of things and kind of fell into the rights part of the industry, which is, rights is really niche as far as publishing goes, even for our tiny industry. But it really works well, I think, with what I studied in school, and I always had an interest in foreign language and foreign literature, and rights is sort of as close as you can get to that in what we do.
Can you tell us a little about what rights are? So if someone is just like, hello, I am an author and I wrote this book. When you are a person who's a rights manager, what sort of things are you actually working with in respect to the book?
The way I like to think about rights for books is it's this way of extending the life of any given title. So when you're thinking about all the different ways your book can exist in the world, or your story even beyond the book.
Obviously, you would like it to be like a nice printed copy that has covers and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Yes. That's kind of like the first step of the book.
Yeah. Although for something like a novel, you could have an audio version that wouldn't necessarily come anyway, but digitally, and it could still be a really nice version.
Yeah. So audio rights are part of your job to negotiate.
Audio, translation, of course, and, even sometimes film, that can happen. Book club, like if you remember going to Scholastic book fairs when you were a kid, that falls under rights too.
I think a lot of cartoonists have a really hard time it's such a big term that gets thrown around a lot. I think people have a hard time understanding what falls under that umbrella. And it sounds like part of what you're saying is that it actually includes basically every part of publishing involves rights. It's just that we only talk about some parts of it in terms of rights. But technically when you are... please correct me if I actually want to know if I'm understanding this correctly. So technically when I sell my comic, or no, let me rephrase that. When I sign with a publisher who's going to publish my comic, they now have the world or the US or whatever rights to publish my book. So that's the first rights that I'm giving to somebody. And then there are further
the necessary rights that you have to give to a publisher. you can't be a publisher and publish anything before.
Yeah. So people who say, don't sign any of your rights away, it's like, okay, well, some of them.
Yes. So what I do is called subsidiary rights. So the kind of big original rights to publish, and, I think most publishing contracts line it up as print, publish, and sell the book. Those are going to your U.S. publisher. And then there's subsidiary rights that are in kind of a later section of the contract usually. And that's what someone in my position has to work with. And it really is this extension.
So it can be like everything from book fairs to radio plays and films and book clubs and first serial and excerpts and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah. So first serial is like when, Mindy Kaling's new book of essays come out and the New Yorker publishes a couple for you to read before that. That's considered first serial. I don't know if we need to explain the different kinds of rights.
The entire existence of this podcast is to laboriously explain a bunch of really obscure nonsense. So please, if at any time. I think I'm jumping around Gina's questions a little bit here, but so as a subsidiary rights person, like, are you only working with books that are within the company that you're working at? Are you working with other publishers to help them out? Like, what does that mean, practically speaking?
I am only working with books that the publishing company that I work for is publishing, and I'm not even working with every single book on our publishing list. I'm only working on the books where the authors and illustrators have signed to us the subsidiary rights that we can then license.
Yeah, Miriam's like the in-house rights person at Holiday House. So she works here at this company that we are recording on their table.
We are literally sitting in right now.
And works specifically with the books that they publish only. Yes. Mm-hmm. And, medium to large size publishing houses will have a rights person probably on staff who is dedicated to just selling rights all the time.
Yep.
So can you tell us about just like what you do day to day? Like on a normal day, like what is your actual job? What is involved with it?
One of the things that I like a lot about my job is that it kind of touches all the other parts of the publishing house. So I work with pretty much everyone in order to do my job. And I kind of do a little bit of everything also. So I am doing everything from kind of staying on top of the production schedule to find out where our materials for the books are. I read all the books that I'm trying to sell, and talking to the editors about their perspective on the books and, how they expect something maybe to change over the course of their editorial process. And then I'm getting the materials that our marketing department has created and our publicists are working on. And I kind of gather that and I package it all together and I send it out to my contacts to kind of promote our book to foreign audiences or audio audiences, not so much for graphic novels. That's not a good medium for them. But, so we can talk about it in terms of foreign publishing translation rights. So I'm promoting our books out there, getting them into the world.
So when you say your contacts, like what kinds of other people are you working with outside of your publisher?
One thing that makes translation rights tough is that I'm here in New York most of the time.
You don't speak all the languages in the world.
I don't. No, I don't. I could lie to you, but it's true. I don't speak all the languages in the world. So what I have are agents, sub-agents, who work for us representing Holiday House books in countries, we usually say territories around the world, and they're on the ground in all these far-flung places. They have really strong relationships with foreign publishers that they can speak to in their own languages, And so I have very strong relationships with our agents, and I'm mostly sending things to them, and then they kind of feed them out to publishers in their territories. Do you want to know why we say territories?
I mean, I kind of do, yeah.
Okay, so the reason is because country is too specific when we're really talking about languages. So, for instance, my Spanish agents were here visiting yesterday. They are based in Spain. They live in Barcelona. That's where their office is. But they do Spanish representation throughout the world because there are so many places that speak Spanish that are not in Spain. So rather than saying like a country name, we would go with this kind of Spanish territory.
Well, I know a lot of the time when I'm in contracts and I'm looking at a lot of time, it says North American rather than like America specifically, because it's actually America and Canada a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So the agents that you're talking to, are they just at an agency the way my agent is an agency? Do they have specific publishers that they're working with? Is it kind of like you're trying to get the attention to somebody who's then going to shop it around to a bunch of different people? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So sub-agents and book agents are different things.
Oh, no, I know. Yeah, exactly.
But let's explain to the podcast people also.
I mean, that's, yes, please.
Yeah.
I kind of know, but I would like to know more.
So a book agent will work with one author to get them a book deal, probably in the main territory they work with. Most of the people that we're talking to on this podcast, that will be like US and Canada, or it will be like world English. But a sub-agent.
Foreign sub-agents, they represent the lists of specific, in this case, US publishers, and they have specific lists that they're working on, and they are taking what I send them, and they're working with, all of the people that they know in publishing houses in whatever language they work in, to match up our books to certain people's lists and kind of be that person that is saying, oh, I think actually this book would work really well on your list. And I also can help facilitate that if I know, oh, this editor in Germany really loves this author, really loves this kind of story. I think we should really try to push this book with them. And we'll have conversations that are sort of about where a book might sit best.
So if you have a sub-agent in China, they might be a sub-agent for Holiday House, but also work with a few other publishers as well. And their job is basically to go around to all the publishers in China and be like, hello, publishers in China, you should publish all of the books that I am representing from all these different places.
Do these sub-agents tend to have like a specialty, like mostly children's books or mostly nonfiction, or is it more just with a relationship? Is it more based on the publisher, or is it more based on like the kind of book?
It depends. A lot of it depends on the territory also, and kind of the size. There are definitely some sub-agents that do more kids lists, some do more on the adult side, some maybe specialize in nonfiction. There are a couple that specialize in graphic novels, but for the most part, it's kind of the relationships that rights people and their sub-agents have. And, we might talk about what lists make sense for someone to do.
Are there things that are different with selling graphic novel rights than picture books and prose, which I know you've also worked on?
Yes, as I think is probably true for every aspect of working with graphic novels. The biggest difference is the amount of time they take to make. So where, a picture book, people might hear about it at the time that it gets acquired by the publishing house, and then buzz can start to build from like a marketing and publicity standpoint pretty much right away, and that fairly rapidly can translate into rights deals or various other kinds of tangible outcomes for the book. But with graphic novels, they just take so long to put together because they're so intricate. There's so much art, there's so much of the story and the development that really has to go together with the text and the art. They just take a really long time to put together, so you want to wait and make sure everything is in a good place before you start bringing it out into the world.
Yeah, and you said that there's some sub-agents that you've worked with who have a graphic novel specialty as part of what they do. Is that because they like have relationships with the graphic novel specific publishers in other places, or like what's involved in them having a specialty?
I think this is another place where you see similarities throughout the graphic novel and comics world, which is that it's a really tight-knit community of people that really, really love this medium. And so there are some subagents out there that have a really strong affinity for graphic novels specifically, and who really know the people with specific graphic novel lists around the world.
So can you kind of like just completely walk us through this process? Like you said that a lot of what you do with your job is kind of preparing packets to send out of things that subagents can pitch. So, you know, if that's the first step, like pulling together something that's like a manuscript or a full PDF of a book, like what happens next after that? You send it to the subagent, and then...
So I send it to them and I tell them why it's really great and why, like, in what ways they should be pushing it and promoting it to publishers in their territory. And I keep updating them with any good publicity that comes our way, any news that we get in about the book. And that is how the beginning part of the rights process happens throughout most of the year. There are 2 big international book fairs. On the kids' side, Bologna in Italy happens every year in the spring, and in the fall, Frankfurt Book Fair happens around October every year. There's also a specific comics festival in Angoulême, the London Book Fair, which is kind of more adult rights. But those are rights-focused international book fairs, and so we go out there, and that's when I get to see all the publishers in person and talk about our books. And, you know, it's kind of another forum to really sit down face-to-face with people and tell them about our books. So that ends up being very important kind of moments in the year. So once we convince someone to buy a book, they have a good understanding of the title. They know it's going to sit well on, you know, their list. And then we do a licensing contract. So pretty much a similar kind of contract to what the author is originally signing up with their U.S. publishing house. We're going to do a license of, say, the French rights to this French publisher who's adding it to their list.
Yeah, so you have a contract.
Yes.
So how does that work with the author? Like, where is it useful for authors to get involved in this?
I always like to let authors know about any kind of rights deals that are happening for their book, because it's really exciting, and it's
definitely exciting.
Yeah, I think it's just like a fun way of really seeing your audience grow into maybe somewhere that you haven't been before, or someplace that, you know, you never imagined seeing your book in a bookstore there, and to know that that is going to happen, I think is really fun for people. And we want to also make sure, of course, that authors are going to be happy with the licensed editions that we're talking about. Like you were saying, you want to be sure it has a cover and it has...
That they're not like, we're going to take out this last chapter. Or...
Right. That's fine, isn't it? We decided that the end would actually be better if he didn't die.
But authors can kind of get involved in the process. Like, you know, you sign the contract, and it might not be a situation where authors are just like, hello, Japan, you are publishing this book. I someday will see it. It might be a situation where they, with the contract you've negotiated, have a little more involvement with that.
Yeah, sometimes. I think it can depend on both the author and the foreign publisher. Sometimes our licensees abroad are really interested in doing interviews with the authors and getting them to help do promotions, or I've even seen people get original art to use
for the cover.
Exactly. Sometimes for the cover. That is something that's kind of interesting about working in rights is that you learn a lot about what kinds of covers work in different markets, because it is not the same. It's probably slightly less true for graphic novels. Sometimes they do need to change it. Just the trim size for what's going to fit on a bookshelf in a bookstore in China could be different than the way our bookstores are physically laid out here. So they have to change to the trim size of the book in order to sell it in a store. Things that you wouldn't necessarily think about can actually be, really big points of conversation when you're talking about rights.
I'm admittedly thinking about the 8 billion different Harry Potter covers, but which all had very different tone from each other in a lot of ways.
And that's all about the market, what works. And especially I think people are very sensitive about the children's book market in all of these different places because of just the way people think about kids' books everywhere is so different. And so the design of the book becomes really important in that context.
So money is
about money.
Money is obviously involved here in some way. Whenever you're doing a rights deal, anything from a film deal to an audio deal to radio play or for serial or rights, is that something that an author should be expecting to see? Perhaps I will get $50, or is it something where an author should be like, I have made back my entire advance and more? What's kind of the scale that you look at, and what does a really good rights success look like on that?
Oh, that's complicated. Because the answer is that it's always different. Everything is a unique case. Something like for serial, you're probably going to see not a ton of money. In the kids side, especially, I think the adult market for first serial is still a little more robust, but it's something that's been rather quiet on the kids side recently. It could also, all of everything I'm saying could change. Also, I should put in that major caveat. I mean, something that I think is also pretty consistent across various parts of publishing, not just rights. But if you're an author who's already well known, who's won some awards, who's a bestseller, then you can expect that your rights will, be recognized as more highly valued in other areas besides just the US. But you can also probably expect that the same thing to be true of your advances in the U.S. market.
So here's a different way of thinking about this then. And again, please correct me if I've misunderstood this. So my understanding is that if your publisher is negotiating for these kinds of sub-rights for you, any money that is involved in that basically ends up being added toward the ongoing tally that's against your advance, right?
Yes.
So you got an advance on, for instance, royalties, but that's also an advance on things like money from sub-rights. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah.
So for an author to earn out, how much are sub-rights a part of authors, yes, my book earned out, as opposed to just selling? Because I think most people think that their book is going to earn out primarily but just by selling copies of their books in America. But I get the sense that for a lot of authors, it's actually things like, 10 other countries decided, or 10 other territories were really excited about this book, so we sold translation rights to a bunch of different people, is actually what helps their book earn out. Is that true, or am I misunderstanding that?
It can be true.
But you've had books that have earned out based on the right sales, before they've even come out?
Yeah. But I can't say that's
not the norm.
Yeah. That's a special case. But there are some times when a particular book will do better abroad than it does in the U.S. That's like a 1 in a million kind of a thing, but it does happen sometimes. Or like you said, if 10 other countries are really excited about something, they all decide that they must publish it in their language.
I mean, obviously all books are different, but I think that it's very easy to lose track of how much people who don't spend a lot of time thinking about this just this isn't even on the radar. It's less like we need to pin down exactly how much of your advance is going to get paid back by rights, and more just like, I don't think people even know that that's a aspect of it.
Yeah, and maybe it's interesting for you to know that rights deals are also set up in the same way as a traditional U.S. publishing contract is. So rights contracts are an advance against royalties as well. So it's not just a one-time thing. You might see, the foreign publishers are also tallying up the sales of your book in that language for that edition, and you might earn out your foreign advance, and then you start earning royalties on that edition too.
Man, that's so complicated and also really interesting. I hadn't quite thought about it that way, but of course it would have to work that way. It's not like, China gets to pay you $5,000 and then sell 3 million copies of your book.
Without ever speaking to you again.
Yeah, right. That's it. That's all you get.
That's
a bad contract.
Yeah, right. Don't let that happen.
Although that's a good lead into one of the other questions that Gina had, which was, so authors do sometimes try to negotiate this stuff for themselves.
Because they'll know a publisher in another country or have some sort of connection, or someone will email them directly.
So, like, are there things that you feel like those people should be keeping in mind or stuff to look out for? Or, I mean, you could also be like, never do that, absolutely, in a million years. Like,
I mean, as the rights person here, when I'm doing a license with someone else, I'm basically signing up to help them publish this book again, right? So they're going to do a new edition of your book, and they are going to do everything as far as publishing it, from designing it, not redesigning it, but their place and the layout, exactly, the translation.
It's a comic. They have to re-letter the whole thing. Maybe they have to redo all the sound effects because they don't exist in these languages.
Or they're different. That's something that people don't often think about. But animal sounds, for example, or just even like boom, that is going to be different in different languages.
Yeah, people maybe have to redraw a lot of word balloons because the text doesn't fit in them in the translation. There's like extensive work that the foreign publisher will have to do to get the book to go in beyond just putting a copyright page in it.
Right. And that's just for the printing of the book. So then they're going to also market the book in the same way. They're going to do publicity and promotions, and we're going to help them do all that stuff. I mean, we're not helping with all the day-to-day details. The foreign publisher knows their market the best. They're going to take care of that stuff. But there's a lot of facilitating.
You're like providing them with assets and sort of maybe sometimes getting things from you're a facilitator for all kinds of things, I assume, right?
But, I think some people who are going to be listening to this podcast are, for example, self-publishing their own work through Kickstarter, or, working with a press so small they don't actually have a rights agent. So are there things they should watch out for in a deal? You want to be prepared. This is a lot of work.
Yeah.
It sounds like that's kind of what you're starting out with, is understand this isn't a one-time thing. Right. It's going to be an ongoing process.
Right. I mean, it is. It's a new version, a new publication of your work. So just, expect that there won't be a similar amount of work. I mean, of course, the book is created, so you're not going to have to do that part again. But the rest of it is definitely something that's happening, kind of from the ground up, just in a different way.
Are there red flags that people should look out for when they're talking to people who are interested, or?
I think really the important thing is, like Gina said when we first started talking, just make sure that they're gonna put together something nice. You want to make sure that it's a viable publisher, that they're, they make quality books and they're gonna do right by your work.
So it sounds like also you were saying how these contracts actually look a lot like the contract that I, for instance, signed with For a Second for my book. They're just sort of a contract within so basically people should just be looking out for the same stuff they'd look out for any other publishing contract. Are you saying they have the right to publish your book forever and never give you any money? Maybe don't sign that.
Right. Yeah.
In which case they can see our earlier episodes about
Did you guys
actually no? Have we even gotten? No, we haven't
contracts
even gotten.
Is next.
Yeah, stay tuned for a future episode in which we get into shitty contracts.
And good contracts, the whole kaleidoscope of contracts.
Yes.
I guess I should say there's a convention, before we warn people away from this forever. There's a convention in British publishing where they do sign for very long terms, sometimes term of copyright. So that is how British publishers do it. That is a standard thing. You're not going to get away with telling them no on that. So, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that's industry standard for them.
I did not know that.
When you're like going home at the end of the year and you're like, okay, I'm like looking at all my titles. When you're looking at your books, how many territories or countries of having sold like one book to are you like, this was the victory? Is it like 2 or is it 10? Are you like, where is that scale tilted towards?
It depends on the kind of book.
Yeah. So for a graphic novel.
France is probably the most active market for graphic novels in translation. That being said, selling your book into France is not a guaranteed thing. That's still exciting and a great thing, but they're often the first people to respond. They have a really lively, dynamic graphic novel scene. They have Angoulême, which they've been hosting for many years. You know, they're just really active. Somewhere like Japan, they have such a strong, specific comic scene that they very, very rarely buy in translation. So if you sell a graphic novel into Japan, that's like amazing. You got the gold medal.
I was there a couple years ago, and it was so interesting which books were not only in translation there, but like were like the big book. Like Black Hole was like everywhere while I was there which is fine. Like it's a good book, and like it was pretty popular here. But in Japan, it was like the #1 English comic that was on display in all the stores that it was in. That particular, like, okay, I guess you guys are really digging this sort of black and white horror scene. I guess that's what you think when you think American comic. You think crazy monster teens. That's fair.
It is fair. Yeah.
That's actually really fair.
Yeah.
That's America all over.
Yeah, no, seriously. So basically, like, if your book gets kind of translated into 2 to 5 languages, that's like pretty good.
You did great. Yeah. And occasionally you'll get a lot more than that, but that's usually if you win an award or something else that really skyrockets things. And also, there are some markets that are really tiny, like the Netherlands. If you sell your book into Dutch, that's awesome because they thought it was worthwhile to publish your book for a tiny audience, and that is really cool.
Oh, that's really charming, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, and if you can't answer this for whatever reason, that's fine. But can you think of a specific book that you've worked with that just was wildly popular as in translation, that in a way that you would not have expected? Like, people sure are horny for this pig book, or like whatever. I mean, I'm sort of curious if you have like some examples of
something that you would expect too. I mean, and that's a graphic novel, like something that you're like, this book did so well.
Usually with graphic novels, there are certain styles that work really well in America that don't work abroad. Like, a lot of our kind of more cartoony styles just don't translate. So something that is super popular here might not work. It can be disappointing to authors, I think, to be a bestseller in the US and not have any rights deals, but it's just like some styles are just really hard to do. And at the same time, or on the other hand, some styles work really well for European markets, and so you might find like a runaway hit in France that barely sold any copies in the US. And that oftentimes has to do with the art.
That's really interesting. So it's like that instant shelf reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
So can you tell us a little about book clubs and book fairs? I know you mentioned them at the beginning, and we've been kind of talking about translation all the time, but are deals for them arranged differently than the way you would do a foreign rights deal?
Yes. This is complicated because actually right now our book club deals are going through our sales team, so I'm not even doing them. So I don't know if I should even really go into it. It's different at different publishing houses because of the way book clubs work. They are, often the publishing house is doing the printing.
So they'll like run on an extra however many copies of the first printing that they're doing for the club.
Yes, that's exactly right. And so they can either be bundled under sales because they're working with those accounts and they're figuring out how to make it work with the print run that we're doing for domestic retailers, or you can also put it under rights.
How is it? I'm actually curious about this. How is it a rights thing? I think book clubs are such a bizarre creature that I think Gina's explained them to me like 50 times, and I can't, because they're not the same. I mean, they're not a bookstore. Like, they're not like a regular retailer for books. It's like an organization that is sort of, you know what, I'm not even going to attempt to explain this. So like, how would it be a rights issue as opposed to a sales issue?
So PJ Library or Junior Library Guild or Scholastic.
Yeah. So those are all specifically book clubs. They're not sold in regular retailers for the public. You have to be essentially a member. And they are special editions. They're branded for that company that's selling them. They're specially printed. A lot of the times there are different specs, like a Scholastic edition of a book will physically feel different than
they'll use different paper. They'll take off the flaps of the book. They'll take off the spot lamination. They'll put on more spot lamination.
It's a different edition.
So it's like being translated into the language of that specific book club in a weird sort of way.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
That's very interesting. I hadn't really thought about it that way. I'm sorry. Usually, a lot of these other episodes, we've been talking about things that I mostly know about, but this, I'm like, I don't fucking know anything. This is great.
Like I said, it's a niche of a niche.
No, I love it. This is literally why we created this podcast. Excuse our, like, super weird questions.
No.
To...
It's interesting for me, too, because a lot of the questions that you have make total sense from a person who's not a rights person's perspective. But for me, it's like my day-to-day, so I'm trying to think of how to answer them without just blabbering away. So.
No, it's fine.
So I also want to ask you about the rights fairs that you were talking about. Bologna, Frankfurt, Angoulême, London. So these aren't conventions like the MoCA Art Festival or SPX or New York Comic Con are conventions. So probably like a normal person wouldn't just kind of like walk in off the street and pay $20 and like enjoy the rights fair.
No.
And they would have like popcorn and stuff like that.
I would not recommend.
What happens at them? Give us the like window into the world of rights fairs.
The rights people at the rights fairs, we do our schedules about 4 months before the fairs happen, I would say. And my schedule usually looks like
meetings,
yeah.
Lunch meetings.
Yeah. Oh, no, we don't have lunch. Dinner meetings, drinks meetings. But it is meetings every half hour from, 9 to 6. And then you have drinks with someone, you have dinner with some publishers.
Is this usually scheduled in advance? Like,
yeah.
Or is it like, do you have a sign-up sheet at your table where people are, or is it all done before the convention even starts?
Oh, no. We do it about 4 months ahead of the fair. And there's usually about a week where you don't do anything but make your schedule for the fair.
So what's the advantage of doing this at the fair as opposed to, for instance, having like phone calls or email? Like, is it just...
Or sub-agents going to talk to them?
It's the FaceTime. It's your relationship with that publisher, with that editor that this book is perfect for them, and you just have to sit them down and show them the book and, convince them that it really is the right thing for them. But I think a lot of publishing is really about the personal relationships that we all have. You know, it's such a small community. Even globally, it's a pretty small group of people out there. And we only see some of the foreign publishers a couple of times a year.
You're emailing with these people every day to tell them that they are buying these books, or they're talking to you about the cover or the contract, and you're like, perhaps it would be nice to like see you as a human.
Right. Or even, you know, like our sub-agents, as we were saying before, they are covering a couple of different lists. So they talk to these publishers, all the foreign publishers, they talk to them all the time, every day, multiple times a day. You know, they're on their phone, they're in their offices, but still to then go and see that American publisher that you see twice a year and have them say, no, really, this book is perfect. You must have it. You must publish it. I think that makes a really big impression on people, especially when you get to know one another's tastes and you start to really trust that kind of personal recommendation.
So you're putting like a face and a voice to this sort of 8 million emails and packages that these people are getting. Like, hi, I'm a person, and I personally would like to tell you about this cool book that it's I think that people really underestimate. It sucks because it can be really inconvenient if, you know, for financial or whatever reasons, it's difficult for you to travel, but it's such a huge thing to just sort of be physically able to talk to people every once in a while in this industry.
Yeah.
And what does the Rights Fair look like? You know, you go in the door, is it just like meeting tables, or do you have booths, or?
There are booths. Okay. It's less raucous than Comic-Con, I would say, but there's still books on the walls. There are booths everywhere.
So like at Holiday
snacks.
House, you would have like a booth and it would have a sign, and it would have some book art maybe.
Art, lots of books on the shelves.
Catalogs, I assume.
Tables to meet with people.
I always get the impression that it's a lot like a fancy Comic-Con, only nobody's directly selling anything.
Right. You can't buy books really at the Rights Fair.
That's why BookCon is so weird, because it's like they turn an industry event into like a con, and it's like everybody's like, oh wait, we have to sell things now.
Yeah. Everyone's running around like looking for books and popcorn at the same time, and confusing.
I feel like that was a whole lot about rights. Is there more stuff about rights that you want to talk about? Did we miss giant chunks of what your job actually is?
Or like anything you want people to understand about your job?
I think people don't realize how involved rights is, you know, from the time that the book is acquired, even before. When an editor is thinking about buying a book, you know, rights will have an opinion on whether it could work, whether it's something that we really want to try to go out to the world with. And so even from that early stage, and there's
a component there where, you know, if an editor's like, okay, I have this much money, you know, in my acquisition budget to buy this book, you as a rights person could come in and be like, people love these cartoony pigs all around the world. This style is perfect. I think I'm going to sell 10 countries on this. Up your budget. You know, you should definitely get this book.
Yeah, rights can help at that early acquisition stage, definitely. And then all the way through until after publication, when you're getting reviews, all of that stuff, rights is kind of there alongside the book the whole time. And I think that's something that is hard to see from the outside, and you know, something that makes rights also really fun to do.
And you don't like go away. Like your rights expire like when the terms of the contract expire with the publisher. But 10 years later, the book's still in print. You could still be selling rights to new countries and new territories.
Yeah, actually that's something interesting about Holiday House. We have an editor who's hired specifically to take a look at this backlist that we have and pick specific titles to revitalize and publish in new editions, things that maybe have been out of print since the 70s, the 50s. And so she and I are talking all the time about, you know, this one might have rights potential, so I think we should try to do a new edition and put it out there again.
It's the dream of an author, honestly, to have somebody be like, you know what, I don't think this book has sold a sufficient number of copies. I'm going to take it out and dust it off.
Okay, thanks so much, Miriam. Thanks for coming to talk to us. So can you tell us where people can find you or Holiday House, the company that you work for, if they wish to know more about it following this episode?
Yeah, they can find us at holidayhouse.com.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this. Thanks for listening to Graphic Novel TK. Next week, we'll be speaking with Lucy Nicely about how to go about being a professional cartoonist out in the world, going to conventions, talking to people on Twitter, deciding whether or not to send that incredibly stressful email, all kinds of good stuff. We're really looking forward to it. Graphic Novel TK is co-produced by Gina Gagliano and Allison Wilgus and is brought to you by The Beat. You can find our show notes along with other comics news and podcasts at comicsbeat.com. Our podcast graphics were created by Shivana Sokdeo. Our theme music is by Poddington Bear. You can follow us on Twitter at Graphic Novel TK or email us at graphicnoveltk@gmail.com.
Meetings, lunch meetings.